Okay, well, initially this presentation was going to be given by a lady named Kathleen Robbins, who was integral to really getting this project going. Kathleen couldn't be here today because she's out in Washington, D.C. talking to the Department of Energy about this project. So she turned it over to Joe and I. And that's a risky venture when you turn it over to Joe and I, because we'll take some liberties with the material, as you'll soon see. And the first liberty we've taken is we've changed the title. So instead of it being Growing Jatropha la da 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 da, it is now Joe and Tim's Excellent Adventure. And so we're gonna talk to you about our adventure here a little bit. We're gonna talk about the project background, how this came to pass, my perspectives on what we saw and what we did. Joe's going to then take over and talk about Haiti's first functioning biodiesel plant that we put in while we were down there. And then he'll share some of his perspectives on the excellent adventure. And then we'll open up to questions and answers. But as we go through these slides, we have a lot of pictures. So I will try to explain what you're looking at. But if you have questions, go ahead and speak up, because it's a lot easier to talk about them then than to try to flip back through them after we get 50 pictures down the road. First question is, why the heck did we go to Haiti anyway? I mean, what was this all about? Because us being an Illinois-based organization, set up to help Illinois businesses and so forth, going to Haiti might be a bit of a stretch. Well, we were there to help them develop a sustainable system. And we really feel like that is the key to sustainability, is developing sustainable systems. And when Kathleen Robbins first told us about this project, we identified immediately this is an opportunity to really test this concept of developing a sustainable system. And in that light, we were particularly focused on their energy sources. In Haiti, they get 9% of their energy from wood, 14% from charcoal. Is we here? Yeah, there's your charcoal. 27% from gasoline, 13% from kerosene, and 37% from diesel fuel. Now, in terms of expanding their energy capabilities, Haiti is 98% deforested because they've cut down all the trees for fuel, and all their fossil fuels are imported. There's no source of natural gas or oil or coal there. So that makes for some pretty dim prospects in terms of moving forward with energy. So when you look at the Haitian power grid, the first thing you notice is there is no power grid. They get all their electricity is provided by diesel generators. And they've got them sporadically around the country in various communities and so forth. A lot of them have been donated through different programs and so forth. Haiti imports about $350 million a year of diesel fuel to run these generators and to power some vehicles. All of it is imported, and the United States, my understanding is the United States actually pays for the fuel. Most of the generators lay idle because they can't afford to purchase fuel for them. And consequently, most of the homes there do not have electricity. And that was one of the things that leapt out at Joe and I when we first got there. We got there kind of in the evening, and the community we went to was pitch black. Nobody had lights on in their home. They didn't even have lamps, oil lamps or anything going. This shows the world at night. Now, I guess you're not going to be able to see it very well, okay, this is the island of Hispaniola here. On the Dominican side of the island, you see a lot of lights. On the Haiti side of the island, you see one little dot down here where Port-au-Prince is. That's the largest city in Haiti. And then the rest of it is just dark. They just don't have any power there. This describes Haiti's current system for providing power to its citizens. What they do is the U.S. sends money to the Arabs. The Arabs send diesel fuel to Haiti. Haiti burns a little bit that they have in diesel-powered generators. That produces electricity and goes to the citizens from there. And I don't think it takes a scientist studying sustainability to determine that this is not a very sustainable system. Yet it's been going on that way for many years. And so a lot of people for a long time have been trying to figure out a way to get Haiti more energy, more power. And that's where this organization, Partner for People in Place, comes in. And the website for them is listed there. You can Google it and get there probably faster. But this is a not-for-profit organization that promotes sustainable outcomes for humanitarian and environmental projects through ecological and community-based planning. And they are the ones that brought Joe and I into the project. The fellow we traveled down to Haiti with is this fellow Rob Fisher, and he heads up this not-for-profit organization. And this is Kathleen Robbins here, and she's also affiliated with that organization. And they're the ones that started this Jatropha Pepinye. And what Jatropha Pepinye means is Jatropha nursery, where they take Jatropha seeds and they start these little plants, and they start them there. And I'll show you pictures of all of it. And then they put them out in the field to grow. So that's kind of how it got going. And about 3 years ago, Kathleen came to visit us. She actually lives here in Champaign, and told us about her experiences. She actually went to Haiti with the idea of starting a cellular telephone network there. She got there, she realized they couldn't support a cellular telephone network because they didn't have enough electricity to support it. So she found out where to get your electricity from diesel-powered generators, can't afford to buy diesel fuel, and so on and so forth. So she decided to work on the root of the problem. She found this Rob Fisher guy, and they were looking for a source of biodiesel. They knew Jatropha was native to Haiti. They also knew that in India, and we have some people from India here today, they're growing a lot of Jatropha for biofuel production, and so they looked at doing it there. And that's kind of how it all got started. She had seen an article about the center in the Champaign News Gazette about our work with biodiesel, and she came here to talk to us and said, can you help us make biodiesel? So that's kind of how it all got started in a nutshell. So what is Jatropha? It is a native perennial shrub or tree. It can grow into tree size. They frequently prune them back, though, to keep them bushy, so they produce more beans. It's easily cultivated without irrigation or fertilization. It grows on marginal lands that are too dry or too poor for food crops. It's well adapted to grow in difficult places, including arid mountain slopes. It can be used for stabilizing slopes and so forth. Goats and other grazing animals won't eat it. They won't eat the beans that we're after here, which is good and bad. We'll talk about that a little more. It's resistant to pests. It reaches full seed production within about 3 years and will produce beans for 40 to 50 years, which are easily harvested by hand labor. It's very productive with these beans, and we'll see some pictures of them here in a minute. It produces 15 to 30 tons per acre of beans after the plants are 5 years old. The beans contain about 35% oil, which compares favorably with soybeans, which are about 30% oil. The oil yield is 5 to 10 tons per acre in these beans, if we squeeze all the oil out, which means that we're producing 700 to 1,400 gallons of oil per acre. And if we compare that to soybeans, we only produce about 50 gallons of oil per acre. But it's not fair to do a bean-to-bean comparison, so to speak, between soybeans and Jatropha, because soybeans are grown principally as a protein crop. And that's the primary product you're getting out of soybeans, whereas the oil is a secondary crop. Whereas the Jatropha, we're only going to get oil because the beans are not really edible. In fact, they're poisonous. Now, there is some research going on to extract the toxins out of them and so forth, and some people claim success, but not commercially viable yet, for sure. So here's a shot of the Jatropha Pepinye, the nursery, and you can see the little bags there that they put seeds in them, and they water these, and they have, I think, about 10,000 going at any one time. They keep them growing under these larger trees. These are mesquite trees. Mesquite is not native to Haiti. It came in with some cattle. Some Texas cattlemen tried to graze cattle over there, and it came in with the cattle. So it's actually an invasive species. But they keep some up there to keep some shade on the plants so that they don't dry out as fast. So they start it there, and then here's another shot of them, and they're little bags there, so they can easily be transplanted. This is what the plant looks like close up after these plants are about a year old. They're probably about 3 or 4 feet tall. And here you can see them, they're in rows here. So they've been transplanted from the nursery to the field, and that's what they look like after about a year. Here's some of the beans. They weren't supposed to start producing beans till after a couple of years. These plants were not quite a year old, and they'd already produced some of the beans that you see there. And they had accumulated, I don't know, half a dozen bushels of beans already, even though the plants weren't supposed to be producing. So we had some to work with while we're there to try to expel oil out of and so forth. So we talked about the existing system in Haiti for producing and using energy and how it's not sustainable. The notion here is that by using a native plant, Jatropha, that we can make a much more sustainable system for energy production and use. So the notion here is that you clear some of the scrub land, which they have tens of thousands of acres of scrub land that you can't even graze cattle on. It's just scrubby stuff that you can't hardly even walk through, and sheep won't even go into it. So the idea is you clear that off, you plant Jatropha in rows, like the rows I just showed you, and grazing animals can go between those rows then and kind of keep it mowed for you once you get it cleared. All right? So you can still use it for food production. We use it for food production and oil production. We'll harvest the beans, extract the oil from the beans, convert the oil to biodiesel. Well, we don't necessarily have to do that for electricity production, but probably will in the near term. We distribute the fuel. Some of it can be used in vehicles. Some of it can be used to produce electricity, and then that will provide additional electricity to people's homes so they can do things like read at night. School children there can't read their homework at night because they don't have any light. So our view, and obviously a lot of other people's view, is that this system would be a lot more sustainable because you got $350 million a year being invested in fuel in Haiti. Investing it in this type of system would be much more productive because the money would cycle around their economy and make their economy much stronger, as opposed to shipping the money to the Arabs so that they can build another palace and shipping fuel that you only use one time. Right? So you have $350 million on the table to work with to make a better system. We think this is a better system. Now, and we think there's a significant business case here. Can anyone think of a corporation that might be interested in such a system? I can think of two Illinois-based companies, companies that make equipment to clear land, that make equipment to plant crops, that make equipment to harvest crops, that make equipment could make equipment to extract oil and convert to biodiesel. The largest diesel generator producer in the world is based in Illinois. Anybody have any idea what I'm talking about? Caterpillar Corporation, who just laid off a bunch of people and is looking for new markets. And that's one of the beauties of looking at sustainability from a system perspective. If I went to Caterpillar and said, you know what you guys ought to do is consider selling equipment to Haiti, they'd think I was nuts. They'd say, that is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. They have no money. They can't buy our equipment. Why would we waste our time? But if I talk to them about a $350 million a year business opportunity to create a better system, they're going to listen to that. And they already have. I've had several meetings with them, but we haven't got far enough up the chain yet to really get them fully interested. So that's part of the beauty of breaking down these opportunities into the full system, because you really expose the full opportunity there. The status of the project in Haiti is they currently have 50 acres planted to Jatropha. It's in 7 different plots, each, in the 5 to 7 to 9 acre range. They have plans to plant another 8,400 acres by 2013, and on that acreage they will produce 500,000 gallons of oil per year. They have one major client that's really interested in that fuel, and that's Digicel. Digicel is the cellular telephone provider there. Half the people in Haiti now have cellular telephones, and Digicel's having to import all the fuel to run generators, and they want to contract with local farmers to grow the Jatropha to produce this fuel. So that's the initial client that will hopefully create the critical mass to really make this a growing industry in the country. So now, any questions on the Jatropha opportunity? Yes?
The 500,000 gallons, how does that compare to either the current use or cell phone use, for instance? What sort of
That will cover all the cell phone use, but that's less than 1% of their total use. So it's really just getting started, even when you look that far ahead. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, right.
How does that happen? And who's doing that?
I'm going to let Professor Pickowitz explain that to you in just a few minutes, because that was really our role down there. We went down there to show them how you can convert this to biodiesel, and we ran it in their generator, and we put it in lamps, and we did all this stuff, so yeah, we're going to get to that. Thank you. Okay, so I just want to talk for a couple of minutes about our general experiences. Joe and I have been doing this sort of thing for a really long time. We've worked in every industrial sector imaginable, certainly everyone that exists in the state of Illinois. We've been doing it for a long time with all types of technologies, all types of processes. You'd be hard pressed to find two people who can adapt to changing circumstances the way we can. We were ill prepared for the cultural shock that we experienced going into Haiti. The technical things we dealt with very well. The cultural stuff was a different matter. Now, we flew into Santiago, Dominican Republic, which is just off the map here. We crossed the border into Haiti at this community here, Ogabajan, is that how you say it? So, yeah. And then most of our work was done in a small rural community here called Terrier Rouge. Although we made several trips to Cap Haitian, which is a little bit larger city right on the Atlantic Ocean. And then we had to go back to Ogabajan a few times for materials and equipment and supplies because, as we found out, you can't hardly buy anything in Haiti. They just don't have stores that are well stocked. So and we were there for about a week, a little over a week. And this is, Joe and I at the border, for the Dominican Republic, between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And so we're on the Dominican side, and it's a nice place, people are friendly and so forth, and it's a nice, clean community, well run, as a lot of Latin American communities are, and we're like, no big deal. And again, we were ill prepared for what we would face when we crossed underneath this arch, because that's when you cross the river into Haiti. And so some of these pictures will show what we faced. The first thing we met was our new friends from the United Nations peacekeeping force there. These fellows were from Uruguay, and they try to keep order on that border. Notice I said try, because it gets crazy in a hurry. When you cross over the bridge and get into Haiti, you can see this is complete chaos here. But what you can't get is the full panorama, because it goes on in both directions, and nobody's staying still. People are bustling back and forth and so forth, and bumping into you, and there's trash everywhere. There's no trash pickup in Haiti. So all the plastic water bottles and soda bottles, everything's, the roads are paved with them. I mean, it is just nuts. This shows more of it. I mean, just complete chaos. Now, what you can't see here is on Mondays and Fridays, the border between the Dominican Republic and Haiti is open. So you don't have to go through customs. And people go back and forth. And since you can't buy anything in Haiti, thousands and thousands of Haitians cross the border in the Dominican Republic to buy their supplies and materials or things that they're for their businesses on Mondays and Fridays, and then they bring it back across. So on this bridge, you have thousands of people going both directions simultaneously, and they're not in lanes. And if you've ever seen movies or news reports where thousands of refugees are leaving the country, it's like that, only it's kind of worse because they're going both directions. And that's why there's United Nations guys that are there with guns to try to keep some semblance of order. And people are loading up these bags. You can't really see it too well because there's so much stuff in the way, but these bags are mounted on a cart. And guys are pushing that through. There's probably several tons of turnips and potatoes and things on this cart, bananas, and these guys are pushing that along. And when they get that thing going down a hill, they lose control of it. And that's going on continuously while you're walking along. All of a sudden you get bumped by a car, and it's unbelievable. Some of the people don't like messing with the bridge, and they just cross the river this way. And the relationship between Haiti and Dominican Republic is similar to the relationship between the United States and Mexico, in that a lot of Haitians cross over and work in Dominican Republic and then have to come back. They get deported, and it's all the same types of issues there. This is also the Haitian laundromat, which we'll talk about more in a minute. Here's the truck. When they get the stuff on the other side, you can't really take the trucks across the border. You bring in these carts, and then they load up the trucks and and take it on into the country. Here's a Haitian bus. Here's Joe next to the banana truck. Joe was impressed with all the bananas that were getting shipped back and forth. One of this picture taken by the banana truck. So I got to take it easy because he gets the last word here. Any idea what this might be? This is a Haitian gas station. This is how you buy your gasoline in Haiti. They've got tables like this set up on the side of the road, and when you get low on gas, you pull over, and you buy the gas by the milk jug, and they fill you up. And this one was particularly interesting because it was right next to a Texaco station that had been closed for many years. But they decided that they would take Texaco's advice that was a good location for a service station, and they just used their own means to get it done. Now this is the school that we stayed at. And it's quite an impressive little school building here. And it was started and built by a not-for-profit organization as well. And this guy right here, and I can't remember his name, Joe, he kind of led up that effort. Although there was a priest that really did the bulk of it, and then this guy was the fundraiser guy. This guy went with us to the border one day and got his pocket kicked. So this is the school, and they're just adding on a third story to it. 600 students go there. They're preschool through 6th grade, and they use the Montessori method of instruction there. By all accounts, it's really an excellent school. And you see the little kids there. The girls have these little red ribbons in their hair. Pretty cute. The school, since there's no power grid there, they have solar collectors. So we did have some electricity there. We didn't have hot water. They had these little kind of cottages off to the side of the school, and that's where people who came there on mission trips and people like Joe and I could stay here. And there were some bunk beds in there. There was a bathroom in there, and it flushed and everything. No hot water though. We took cold showers every morning. That got you going. One day we took a shower from rain, and we caught the water running off the roof because it was warm from being on the roof. That was the closest thing to hot water we got. But here's another picture of the kiddos gathering in the morning. They'd all gather in the morning, and they had their own version of the Pledge of Allegiance that they said, and they always sang the hymn, "How Great Thou Art," but they sang it in French, so we didn't know what they were saying. Now, this crew here, this is big brother and little sister, and I think another little sister is hiding behind, didn't want a picture taken. But what I wanted to point out in this picture is, aside from those beautiful red ribbons, which all the girls wear in their hair, and I don't know what these little red things are over their shoes, but those are very cool too. But look at how clean and pressed their school uniforms are. I mean, you wouldn't think too much about that here, but the reason that stands out to me is I can guarantee you that those clothes were washed in the river and hung up to dry on shrubs. And how they got them to look like they just came out of the dry cleaners, I have no idea. But they do. The Haitian people are very fastidious on cleanliness and their appearance and so forth. And here's some kids going to another school. Their colors were blue, and so the girls had blue ribbons in their hair. There. So, and this is the Haitian bar that Joe and I went to our first night there. We went there a couple of times. Rob, the guy from the not-for-profit, said, "You guys want to go to the bar and have a beer?" And we're like, "Yeah," after what we've been through. So we walk through the town, the unlit town where it's completely pitch black out, to get to the bar. And we get there, and this is a little old. It's not a bar. It's a room smaller than any of our offices. But the lady did sell beer there. And then if you wanted to stay there and drink it, she handed this plastic table, like something you get at Menards, she handed it out the window along with the legs, and you set it up, and we're actually out in the street here. And so that was the bar. That was the Haitian bar. The beer was cold, and it was excellent. It was brewed there in Haiti. It was very good beer. Prestige beer. I think you can get it over at Friar Tuck, in fact. It was very good. Rum and beer. Very, very good there. Now, these two fellas were interesting. They were from ExxonMobil. And they spent a couple days with us looking at, the Jatropha plantations and how we're converting it to biodiesel and so forth. They were just there on a mission trip, church mission thing, But they spent a couple days with us, and turned out this guy and I used to work for Exxon, and we had worked in the same region and knew some of the same people and so forth. So it was kind of nice to renew that relationship. But I think that's a potential source of funding to move this project forward, because these guys are very high-level executives with Exxon now. In fact, this guy had just had just been director of production for the Rocky Mountain region before he just took a position in Houston. Now he's in charge of some research in Houston, so we had a lot in common.
Go back. Look, the table, that's where we ate all our meals back there.
Yeah. So, that's the dining room. It was outside, and we ate all our meals outside there. And every meal was the same, beans and rice, maybe with a little piece of chicken, a little piece of goat. One morning before we left, there was a guy out slaughtering a goat with a machete, and then we ate him for supper that night. So, yeah. They use machetes for everything. Everything. Now, the Jatropha nursery is actually located right next to the United Nations fortress there. And this is Joe looking over the wall to the United Nations compound. That's actually the guard turret there, and there's a guy up there with a machine gun. While Joe looks over to see what's going on there, see there's barbed wire strung all across the top there. But who else could spy on the United Nations like Joe could? Joe had complete disregard for the United Nations. In fact, he wanted to get in their vehicle and drive around. Now these are two of our helpers. They had 6 staff at the Jatropha nursery. I can't remember. Well, this guy's Gigi, right? This is Gigi, and I can't remember. He had a really unusual name. I can't remember it. But they're about my son's age, and so we had a lot of fun with these guys. Horrendous smack talkers. These young Haitian teenage boys are. Since they spoke Creole, we rarely knew what they were saying, but you could tell when they were really talking trash to you, you know. And they like to goof off a lot. And they had terrible hats. And so you'll see in a later slide that we addressed the hat issue quite favorably. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe now, and he can talk about the implementations of Haiti's first biodiesel plant.
Thanks, Tim. Here's the first slide. Now this is the devil in the details talk here. This is where it all begins. So here we go. So here's what was our key activities: was to set up the biodiesel system, which meant shipping it over there, building it here, shipping it over there, setting it up, and getting it to run correctly, which seemed to be quite a problem. We also had to run it off a generator, so we had to wire it up, which also ran our lights and our compressor, our heaters to heat the biodiesel, or the oil to make biodiesel. And we also had a side project of putting a well pump in a well to pump water so they could irrigate their crops. And that wasn't really in our task of duties, but it got added on at the end since we had extra time. So. But and then produced biodiesel and then expelled oil from the Jatropha. So here's in the lab. This is our. I jumped on too far here. Let's see. Here's our biodiesel system. This was our first biodiesel system in ISTC's lab. This is ones we used to use. It was our smaller system. Since then, we have built a bigger unit, so we no longer really use this. And Doug Bennett used to take this around to the schools and explain to high school students how to make biodiesel. And several schools, I don't know how many, 20 or 30 schools, more than that, probably 600 some students, to show them how to make biodiesel. And then that project ended. We really didn't have a use for this. And so Kathleen came along and expressed interest, so we kind of donated it to her cause for the Jatropha project. So anyway, we got this system packaged up. Let me go back. So me and Tim came in on a holiday. I don't remember what day it was. Day after Christmas, and we created this thing up in our lab. Got it all created up, getting ready to send to Haiti. So, and then I just so happened I have a relation in Fort Myers, Florida, and I was going down there for Christmas anyway. So I went ahead and put this crate on the back of my truck and drove it down to Miami to Artillery Marine, which is a transport company that does the big crate, the containers, whatnot. So, and there is a Kathleen knows a company. She works with a company down there that ships things to Haiti twice a week, I believe, in these crates. So she got it worked out where we could bring that crate down, put it in the container, and ship it down there. So it was pretty convenient. So I ended up driving down to Miami, and I dropped the crate off, and then they got it loaded, and then about 3 weeks it took to get there. Trying to think what else would happen on that, but anyway, the crate. I'll go back to this. So we're still on the shipping hassle. We got the crate. They got the crate loaded, got it over to Haiti, and it had to go through customs. And it took like 3 to 4 weeks to get through customs, and that's when we started planning our trip. As soon as it got through customs, we were going to go down and set it up. So it got down to customs, and then our workers that we were working with in Haiti, the guys that were going to help us set it up, they had to go to Port-au-Prince to pick it up because that's where the vessel went in, which is about a 5-hour trip.
More like 7 hours.
7 hours.
On really rough roads.
Right. So they had to go down with the truck and pick it up. Okay. And one of the things when we didn't find out that when they got down there, their truck was a little bit too small. So, which I'll talk about later. But anyway, they got it finally got it loaded on their truck and then made the 10-hour trip back, and then got it to the Jatropha farm and put it in this garage type fixture here that was built especially for the biodiesel plant. And you notice everything is made over there is in the blocks with Portland cement. They make that on site here. It looks like right here. This is kind of where they made the blocks to build this building here. Also, when the biodiesel system, you can kind of see it right here. When we brought that biodiesel system in with the generator and compressor and everything, there's a little back room back here because of Haiti. People are, if something isn't attached to something, it gets stolen because people are in desperate need over there. So what we had a little guy over here that camped out every night. He lived there for probably weeks on end, guarding the system here, and the compressor and the generator and whatnot.
He was the guard, but he had no weapon. He had no means of communication. I don't know what he was going to do if somebody should have.
Right. And he had well means. I mean, he had a little campfire back here. He'd cook his food. And he had 2 chickens in there. He'd get his eggs and cook his food and everything. So it's, yeah, he had a machete. And
we have multi-tools here. They have machete.
Right. But anyway, Rob, the other guy that's working with people in place, they're getting a door made for this, so he doesn't have to live here anymore. So when I go back over there, maybe 6 weeks, that this should be up, and he shouldn't have to live here anymore, hopefully. So that's kind of a unique thing there. And some of the obstacles here, here's the generator they gave us, and they really didn't give us any specs on the generator as far as the plugs that went in. I knew the 110 plugs, but when you go in the higher voltage, you have to have a special plug to go in there. And I kind of went up, before I went down there, I thought I had it mapped out. I got on the internet and found this. They really didn't give us any model. So I had to kind of plan on bringing plugs with me. And I think one of the plugs I brought was the only correct one I had. And then we had to go to the store and buy the other 2. But here I was putting the grounding rod in to ground the generator because it was kind of raining out there. And in the background, you can see the compressor here. And some of the challenging, like I said, I already covered the shipping of it. And that was, like I said, when the guys unloaded it, they kind of beat the system up, and they kind of we had some problems with the compressor because one of the valves was broken off, so we only had one. We could only use part of the compressor with it. The other barrier we had was the travel and the language barriers. When you go to Dominican, they speak Spanish. And then when you cross the border, they speak Creole and French. And we had, it was kind of hard to teach them what we were doing, to relate to them on certain issues. The other barrier, like I said, lack of electricity. Like I said, we just had that one generator, right there to work with, and that was it. And it was kind of tough.
And we could only run one thing at a time off the generator. It had 3 plugs. We thought we'd be able to do 3 things, but we could only do
one thing at a time.
So it's continuously unplugging and plugging and
Right, because it was really undersized for really what we wanted to do. Limited access to water. There was no water. We had a let's see if we go back here. They just had a well with a bucket of water where they put the bucket down, fill it up, bring it up. We had to deal with the weather, rainy season. When we first got there, the first few days it was nice, 85 degrees, really nice. And then the last 3 or 4 or 5 days it rained every day. It was a muddy mess. So we had to deal with that. Limited access to materials and supplies. Again, we weren't told to ship anything any more than what we needed with the biodiesel system. And when we got down there, we found out we probably should have shipped more. But I don't know if it would have helped any. But we had to go in town into Cap Haitian to get all the parts we needed that we didn't have, which was kind of hard because they didn't have a lot of things we needed either. So, we had currency issues. In Dominican, they used the peso. So if we went to the Dominican, we had to convert our money to pesos. Or if we went in Haiti, they use goules or Haitian dollars. So they had like 2 currencies there that you would have to work if you either had goules or Haitian dollars. If some places would take goules, some places would take Haitian dollars, or some places both, some places not. So
some places took American money.
Right. So, and then we had limited workforce capabilities. Most of the people, the guys we worked with were fairly young, inexperienced, whatnot. But they were good workers. They're just inexperienced. Plus the language, I had a hard time understanding our language, so that was kind of tough to work through. As far as going to Cap Haitian, this was our hardware store here. This is along the coast. There's a coast right, the ocean's right over here, vessels here. But most of the people in Haiti, I don't know where they got their parts, but it's like people just get stuff out around here, just get stuff out of their garage and put it alongside the street and sell it. That was their way they made their living. But where they picked up their materials at, we didn't have any idea. But we had to buy, a couple drums. They didn't have any drums for us. We had to buy some drums and some 5-gallon containers and various other parts. So this is kind of where we got our storage for our biodiesel and holding our water, get our project going. Anything else you want to add on this picture? No. But this is, and we had to get some heating drums, and most of these are plastic. And over here on the roof, he had some drums on the roof, some metal ones we had to get.
And none of this stuff was new. It was all used, came out of God knows where. And yet they charge top dollar for it.
Right.
Nothing cheap over
yeah, this drum was like $40. I could buy them here for $35 or $30, brand new.
For $35, used there. They had toxic chemicals in them for $40.
And we had to have one of our guys. Anytime they saw Americans, the price would like double. So we tried to stay in the car and let our Haitian people go up and wheel and deal for the parts, because they'd see us, they'd really,
And when they dicker, they just scream at each other and bark at each other.
So, and then this is our other trip to the hardware store. When we needed fittings and stuff, we went to this first store we went to get parts. This is what they had. And this was supposed to be, you pick the part and then you go back and you pay, tell them what you want, and they'd get it out of the store, back in here and get in the store to get it. But this particular store didn't have any, I don't know if they were going out of business. I don't think they were, but they didn't seem to have any parts in stock. So if we needed a part, you could see where the pegboard is here. They've cut parts off here. So if we needed that part, he'd come over and clip that part off, and then you'd go pay for it.
Those were their display models. They didn't have any inventory, so they would cut it off the board and sell that one.
So.
Yeah, they were in people.
But these have been up here for several months or years, it looked like. So I don't know what the deal was on that, but that was kind of strange. And again, we were Americans, so I think they tried to inflate the price on us. But here's starting the biodiesel process here with the workers here. These guys here were big helpers. This is George here. He was the main guy that I was to train to run this system that we took over. He was a really good help. He helped us in the parts store to get parts and everything, to wheel and deal on some of the pieces that we got. Here's the other system here. Here's George here working on the system here. And we're in here. We had some problem with the mixer because we didn't have electricity. So we had to do some hand mixing on here. See if we had a couple laborers doing that to get the process going. And here I am. We didn't have any drums at that time to heat the oil up into to make the biodiesel. So they had these little kettles. The guy that was cooking in the back had these kettles. So we took the oil and we had these portable electric heaters that we ran off the generator to heat the oil up, so we could make the biodiesel. Another thing with the oil, I don't know if you pictures in here or not, but with the oil, they didn't have that over there either. So that's another thing. We had to go over to the Dominican and into Cap Haitian we had to go to restaurants to try to find oil for our biodiesel. They didn't have that, so we were running around quite a bit. Any more comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't actually have enough beans there to produce the oil we needed to make biodiesel. So we had to find an alternative source of the oil, and that turned into
this was just regular, and it came from a cook's. Some of the other islands around, they had to import it. Some of the resort islands would have their old oil. They would ship it to Haiti's restaurants, and Haiti would use it in their cooking in their restaurants. So I think it was Turks and Caicos and Cap Haitian. That's where a lot of this came from. But that was from the resorts, and pretty interesting. Here's Master Tim here helping with. We were heating some oil in here. We couldn't get the heaters to work, and we were rigging some stuff up on here on the biodiesel system. You can see George here. We were mixing the methoxide here to do our esterification of the biodiesel. And again, you can see the low level on the biodiesel system. We had very limited oil to work with. I was wanting to do like 3 or 4 runs on the system, make 2 or 3 batches, but just because we couldn't find any oil, kind of limited us on that. Again, here's Tim and George working on the system, working some of the problems out there. Here's their well where we got the water from. This is a different well. They had 2 wells. They just dug one, had drilled for one a week before. And this was their main one that they were using that we were going to get our water from there.
This one was hand dug, and they used a blind guy to dig it because he wouldn't get claustrophobic. And it's dug about 30 feet deep.
So, but that was how.
You shovel dirt into a bucket, and then they pull it.
That's how they were doing it. So, kind of interesting, but that's how they did it. And you can see them here. They rigged up a little trolley system to pull water out of the well. It looked like here.
There's a chicken.
There's the egg layer right there. So, and then to water wash the biodiesel, if you're familiar with that, we had to rig up since there was no running water, we had to kind of rig up a gravity system, putting a drum up here, filling it up with water, which couldn't get it to work, but it was very interesting. We spent a lot of time on that. Here's a couple of the workers here trying to fill it up.
So they're hoisting buckets of water up there and
filling up by hand.
Gravity feeds the water to the biodiesel.
Here's Tim checking the temperature of the oil before we're getting ready to make the biofuel here. And here's his worker Elidora. He was one of our main workers here that helped us out a lot.
He's going to come live with Joe next fall.
Right. He's trying to speak English. He's trying to learn to speak English. And here we are. This is the well. We're working on the well here. We're taking this pipe. We're putting a lot of these pipes together, putting this 100-foot well to have electric well pump, so they don't have to use the buckets. So we're trying to get that going for them. And Arlen's here. He's an agronomist from the University of Florida, and I think he's now living down there, right?
Yeah, he lives in Florida.
And he speaks very fluent English and French, so he was our main interpreter down there.
But he was only there for like 2 days. The rest of the time we were on.
He was pretty well gone. Then there's George, and then there's Elidora's twin brother, I think. And you can see the Jatropha fields behind here. And this the building we had it had a roof over here, and that's what housed the generator and everything else. It was kind of like on a porch system. Here we are attaching some fittings to the well. Tim's wrapping some pipe up for the well, trying to get it going.
That was their first experience with Teflon tape. So we're giving them the Teflon tape.
Tape lesson here.
He's actually putting it on back.
And then here's Arlen explaining it to George on the heating procedures of heating the oil up, getting it ready to go to make the biofuel. Experiences, and I guess this is my version, but Tim's going to jump in here on some of these. This was along the border, I believe. You can see where they set up these temporary housings where they would try to sell food items, and you can see them here shopping here for clothes and whatnot. And most of the clothing and stuff that that you would see on them, you'd see a lot of athletic jerseys from America, like all your Goodwills and whatever. Yeah, there's the same as Sosa right there. I mean, you see a ton of that stuff, so you know where it came from as far as that. This was downtown, and me and Tim were just discussing this. We didn't know if they had a power grid, but we found out that yes, they have telephone poles, and they are getting power from probably some generators in Cap Haitian, but we didn't know exactly where the power plants were. We're just curious. You can also see that the buildings, it's very French oriented. It's kind of like the French Quarter in New Orleans, the way the building structures are here. It's kind of interesting. And this was taken from the hardware store from where we got our fittings at, where the guy had to clip the board. Before we knew of this store was another hardware store that had everything under the sun that we didn't know about till 3 days later. So we ended up buying most of our stuff in here. Anything else you want to add to that? Good to go. Okay, this was crossing the border when we first got there. You can see the carts here. They just take a tire off of a car and make kind of a little 3-wheeled cart out of it. This kind of looks like a drum tote here that they just put wheels on. That they put the rice on here, and that's how they would transport from Dominican over to Haiti. So, and this was kind of back in here is like a staging area where they would just park their vehicles and then walk over to the border to get their materials. And you can see this new building back here is a new building that they're building for the staging area because it's very chaotic there, and they're putting a new bridge over in here where they can go across.
But that's on the Dominican side.
Right.
They've got quite a good deal going with the Haitians coming to spend all their money.
There. Yeah. And Tim jumped in to help them here.
That was starting to roll backwards.
This is kind of on an incline here on a hill. You can see Tim jumped down there to help him push that up there.
How hot is it that day? It was pretty hot.
It was about 85. It was pretty warm. Plus, we just got off a 2-hour bus ride on a really rough road, and we were pretty rattled, so it was pretty rough. And here's Tim. This is their main fence row they use over here. They don't really have fences or barbed wire. They do have, it's very sparse, but they have this vegetative cactus growing that kind of grows in hedgerows here. You can see it makes really nice rows here. It kind of keeps the animals out. So if they have a field they want to protect from animals grazing in there or eating crops, they plant these large cacti.
And they put yokes around the animals' necks so they can't poke through those holes.
Yeah, I wish we got pictures of those. We didn't get those. Here's the garden this is taken on top of the roof of the school. You see there's a cow running around here, loose here, but this is more American type gardening food, I believe, on top of the field here. There's a lettuce, everything's in rows. We've got lettuce, tomatoes, it's like cabbage and some green peppers and other things. Let's move to our next slide here. I'll go back. Here's some rain barrels here where they collected rain off the school to water the crops with, so that was kind of helped them out on that. And here was the garden behind the school that was kind of a native type garden, right? And they kind of didn't really put it in rows. They just kind of planted it off because that's kind of native how they grew their vegetables over there.
It looks like a weed patch, but it's not. I mean, they've got all their vegetables.
You can see different one here, different plants here. You can see them harvesting things here. Like I said, it's kind of hard to see. And back here is where they house their generators and whatnot to run like the school when at night. This is pretty much where they ran everything. But right here was their shack where they had their guard dogs. So at night, I mean, we were in a fenced-in like compound, and they'd let these dogs run loose at night, keep anyone from coming over the fences and try to steal things. So
And
It's kind
unfortunately,
of
it was muddy, and we leave our shoes out on the front porch, and the dogs would get them.
come in, they'd chew them up.
For their shoes.
So it's kind of interesting. And this is at the border, Haiti and Dominican border here, and you can see the staging area. You know, it's pretty chaotic. It's pretty run down over here where they park their vehicles in here. And like I said, they have no trash pickup. You know, you see all the trash in here. And this guy was kind of our oil run. We needed oil to run our system. So when he was over in Dominican, he kind of helped us out getting our oils. And he's a pretty good guy. He knew people over there, and he could really help us out. So it's kind of interesting. Tim gave him the big thumbs up. He really liked his help.
Well, he spoke both languages.
Yeah, he was good. This is Elidor. This was one of our better workers here. He kind of helped me and Tim a lot. And he was trying to learn English, and he was really phrasing us, trying to get us to talk slower so he could learn the language. And
he wanted to go on and study engineering, and so he spent a lot of time with us to try to learn. He was really trying to learn about the whole process
on that.
And so we got him a line out hat.
Right. And this is Tim and I again at the border here. You see they're doing some trading up in here and whatnot. Still kind of chaotic. And this is another picture of the border here. If you could go up these steps here, right here, the UN's right here, and you go right across to the gates, and you can see people lining up to go in. You can see this guy's he's carrying a wheelbarrow in there, and you can see another crate going, trying to get in there. It's just wall-to-wall people just trying to get through there, trying to get across the border. And you see that there's a lot of motorcycles, a lot of like 125 dirt bikes and whatnot, and most of them I think are made in China. But I talked to Rob, the other guy from People Partner in Place that went with us. He said about 3 years ago they didn't have these, and they were just a new thing, the new thing that just came on. You could buy these over there brand new for $500 or $600. So a lot of people were saving their money and buying these, and that's all you seen going back and forth the border was these motorbikes. People had those everywhere. So it was kind of a new technology for them. Here's Tim and Rob here in the Jatropha field. You see behind there's a little excavating plot where they've got the gravel, kind of like a gravel pit that they would do some of the roads with. And they really didn't have any way to crush the rock. It didn't seem like to me. They just kind of sieved it out, and that was pretty much it. You can see the rolling terrain, but it was really a pretty countryside because they had kind of mountainous areas and stuff in the back. It was kind of out in the country, pretty nice. And this was the byproduct of our making the biodiesel. This was the glycerin we got out. We made since we didn't have anything to do really at nighttime, we made some soap with it. They gave us this little cooking pan to make it in.
And they were really jazzed about the soap because they import all their soap. Right. And they are very fastidious people living this. You can see how, you know, they like to dress nice and be very clean. And so they were about as jazzed over being able to make their own soap as they were the biodiesel.
Right. So we got that. This guy was, this was Yvonne. He ran our complex there. He was the manager of the whole school and took care of all our meals and took care of us really well over there. Anything we needed, he would get it for us. They also had a couple of vehicles that we got to use to go get our supplies and stuff that were donated, and so we got to use that. He arranged all that, so it was really good. Here's the biodiesel crew here. These are all the helpers.
Huge amount of they all have blue hats. Huge amount of, and not only are they Illinois fans, but it shows really other. They support the sheep.
They support the sheep.
Amazing.
Yeah, they like that. But they were really good work. They were really helpful. Tried to help us accomplish what we needed to get done there. Haiti can implement a sustainable biofuels industry. Maybe there is hope for the U.S. Anything you want to add to that?
So, questions?
A question about, doing the biodiesel, so you're going to go through all this process so that you can use it in internal combustion engine.
Right.
What are the possibilities just for internal combustion to produce that? Do any of the biodiesel?
Yeah, I think that they will be able to use the raw oil to power generators eventually. It'll have to be preheated. There's some work that's going to need to be done on that.
Right.
Another reason why I want to get Caterpillar engaged in this because they have an engine lab over in Peoria. And we could send some Jatropha oil over there and they can define what kind of treatment needs to be done to just run the straight oil in the generator. So I think that's definitely doable. In vehicles, though, they're probably going to have to convert that to biodiesel to run the vehicle. It's just too complex to. If you convert to biodiesel first, you don't have to modify the vehicle for the engine. Whereas if you don't convert it to biodiesel, you want to run straight oil, then you got to do some engineering on the vehicle or the engine side.
Right. But you got to keep it hot, like 150 degrees, all the way up to the injectors.
And that makes sense for a generator where it's not going to be moving around. But for a vehicle,
But they don't have diesel cars there.
Yeah, that's all they do.
They have many more than we do. Probably a good third of their vehicles were diesel.
Like most of your small, that's another thing we failed to mention over there. I mean, your Toyotas and your smaller cars are all diesels over there.
Small Toyota diesel pickup trucks were all
a lot of them. But
I had a question about the raw materials, the methanol and lye.
right.
Did you buy it there? Did you ship it in? And what does it cost? And how much of an issue is that?
It was bought there, and it was, by the way, you paid it.
Right. But the thing was, when we got the unknown thing, is see the oil and the methanol and the lye was supposed to already be there when we got there.
We got there, they didn't have oil. Oil would be no problem.
Right.
Raw.
Right. We thought that was going to be the easy one. I thought methanol would be the toughie to get. They had it. They already. I don't know where they got it.
They got that.
And that's why we had to go to the Dominican. And getting the oil, I don't confuse it with the Jatropha, but the oil was just to use to show them how the system worked. And then as soon as we get the expeller and everything going with the Jatropha, then we'll do the Jatropha.
And that's probably our next phase to this project. And I hope to get our Engineers Without Borders group involved because we have a group of university students with the group Engineers Without Borders that makes biodiesel here in our lab from the university cooking oil. And they have some interest in this project. So we have a large oil expeller that you feed grain into, beans, and it squeezes the oil out of it. And we want to get that process optimized here. And then once we have the parameters for running it in place, then that will get shipped over, and they'll have a recipe to work with so they'll feed the Jatropha beans into it. So we're trying to get some Jatropha beans shipped over here so that we can work on expelling the oil over here.
Well, see, we were going to originally ship it over there and then work it out there, but since we had so many problems, we're going to do everything here, get a handle on it really good.
And then we can give them a checklist to work with.
All right. So that was a lot of it.
What about growing some cultivation with greenhouses and blue wires? Is it a tropical plant?
It is kind of a tropical plant. I don't know how well it would grow here. That's something I've been intending to look into. It would definitely grow in the south, like in Texas and around there, the southwest. I'm sure it would do well there. I'm afraid frost would get it here, but it might grow in southern Illinois. I just don't know. It's. I think it would be controversial to grow it here because it's not a food crop. Here we have the whole food versus field debate, which is interesting. We don't have that there. Even though in Haiti, people riot in the streets for food shortages, yet they're welcoming this biofuel crop.
It's highly toxic.
Right.
Animals live, don't have to eat it, but the animals do don't know.
Right.
Yeah, well, apparently there's something repulsive about it.
Well, it's not.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know, but they don't eat it and die. So they have no desire.
What is the toxin?
It's some sort of protein, and apparently heat doesn't denature it to a point where it's not toxic. I think it has to be extracted, or there are some people working on breeding plants. There are some plants that are less toxic, apparently, and they're working on the breeding side to see if they can breed a bean that's not toxic. But the disadvantage to that then is if you make the bean non-toxic out in the field, then the animals will probably eat it, and so you get a little bit of a problem there with trying to graze in those lands. This way, you can graze in between the plants, and you don't have to worry about them eating your fuel crop. So it's not all bad that the beans are not edible.
Is there any hazard to the workers that are harvesting the beans?
They would have to eat the beans, I think, for it to be.
Yeah, that's pretty safe.
And then just another question about equipment. Obviously, it was your first time trying to get everything going, but the realistic kind of how accessible will replacement parts be for this system once it's down there? I mean, you guys had a lot kind of working on this. But how will they be able to get the
They'll need to keep spares on here,
Yeah.
for sure. I I mean, you can get stuff down there, but it's got to go through customs and all that.
Right.
So for the working parts like that, there's a mixer and there's a hub. You got to have spares of those.
Right.
For the generator, you're probably not going to have a spare, and probably that goes down again. So yeah,
I think a lot of times we have really good ideas here, but they don't have those same resources.
Right.
Yeah.
down
You have to
there.
They
really
have some
work
good
it.
mechanics there. So if the generator breaks down, they've got people who come out and work on it. They really do. I mean, they've got pretty skilled people.
And then also, who is in charge of the nursery? Is it the people? Is it the Partners for People Places?
Yeah, it's there with the farmers.
Okay, so they do have issues.
So the guy I was working with,
They have
George.
their co-op
Right.
that they're working with to try to, they're trying to get thousands of acres there. And they form this co-op. And they've got people kind of standing in line and
So they have
wanting
to
to do it.
buy.
They do.
Right.
So far, they've really been doing a nice job from an extension standpoint. Like we would use ag extension here to try to get the crops in. They're really kind of following that model to get it diffused back there. They've been pretty effective. That Rob goes there every 3 weeks. He spends a week. And you can tell that people really like him. He's a very personable individual. He's learning to speak language pretty well. John?
Do the beans ripen all at once, like
No.
here? Or
No,
do
it's
they-
a real disadvantage. That's one of the things they're working on the breeding. This, corn used to be that way, and they eventually bred sort of all right. And they're trying to do that with Jatropha beans as well, so you can do mechanical harvesting. But right now, since they're harvesting it manually, they just walk through the field and they pick the ones that are ripe.
Or they don't have a
And they get
storage
several harvests per year. They get at least 2 harvests of beans per year. And on a rainy year, they may get 3 harvests. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
I was thinking in terms of logistics, if the beans are ripening at different times, they don't have the storage issues,
Right.
the spoilage that they probably would if they had to try and adapt their situation to storing a year's worth of beans.
Right. Yeah, and storage is something they've really not addressed very well. No, there's no silos there.
It's going to be scaling. It's going to be a scaling up once they get ready to get those.
Is there any sort of governmental structure in Haiti that can help anyway, power grids, tools, parts, anything?
There are obviously some huge political problems in Haiti, and we just didn't develop an understanding of how that works. It just seems crazy that to buy anything worthwhile there, you have to go to the Dominican Republic. Because they have ports there. They have ports in Haiti that you could ship things into. And even though you're not making them there, at least you can collect sales tax on it and so forth, and keep some of the money in the economy. I don't understand what the problem is.
There's something
There's
wrong
a long
there.
history of problems there. I mean, it's really an old country. I mean, Haiti got its independence from France in the early 1800s. So they defeated Napoleon's army and got their independence. And then there's just been a long history of corruption and problems. I don't know. Kathleen understands the history a lot better than we do. It's a mess.
I have 2 questions about the 8,400 acres that placed in 2013. First, when will that be produced? And second, is that all going to be independently owned or
Yeah.
farmer-owned?
Some of those acres are owned by the government. In fact, the kind of majority of them. I think they have some sort of leasing program that the farmers engage in. I don't really understand how all that works. And it's supposed to take about 3 years before they're really producing a lot of beans. But the plants that we showed you were less than a year old, and they were already producing some beans, obviously not very big. About 3 years, and then they produce for like 40 to 50 years after. So that's one of the advantages, because this is a biofuel crop. You don't have to go into planting, like we do with our row crops here.
And this is still a pilot project.
It is. It's gaining some critical mass. Now in India, they've already planted about the Jatropha, and some African countries have as well. So, Haiti's pretty forward thinking on this. They're behind a couple of others.
This is kind of a new frontier, it seemed like to me, didn't it seem like to you?
Oh, it is for them.
It's like the new Wild West, kind of,
Just wanted to mention that there's some other uses here too. The seed cake after you press apparently is a good fertilizer.
It's good. It's very high in nitrogen.
And also the husks is a perfect gas
Right, and they make a lot of char there, as I showed in one of the,
Probably why.
but they make it from vegetation, all kinds of stuff, but from the husks, they're thinking they'll make char from the husk. Is what I'm planning.
What about getting rid of the waste produced by the biodiesel?
Well, the only significant waste is glycerin,
Right.
and they are jazzed about making their own soap. In fact, the soap we made, they tried it, they really like it. Glycerin makes a terrific soap. I mean, most soaps in the U.S. aren't made from glycerin because glycerin can be used for more expensive products. Right. So it's not going to be a problem. They import all that stuff right now, and it's not unusual to see little shops along the side of the road that sell soap and toothpaste and shampoo and stuff like that. They buy a lot of that stuff.
Any other questions? Everything makes sense? All makes sense to you guys? It's pretty difficult time we
Joe's
have.
probably going back.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back into April, but this may be continued. We may have another talk with the expeller, doing the whole thing through the biodiesel all the way through the expeller. So we'll let you know how that goes.